So I'm talking today with Laura. And Laura is a highly qualified hypnobirthing mum because she's had two hypnobirthing babies in different hospitals with different experiences, both very successful. But so perhaps you better not name the hospitals because it was different, wasn't it? Why was it so different for you, depending on which hospital you went to? And actually, you were at home, weren't you? And you were transferred in for a return centre. Tell me about it. Tell me about the first one.
Okay, so the birth of my first daughter was quite an interesting experience. So obviously we'd done the hypnobirthing course for yourself, Catherine, hadn't we? And we were very much set on a home birth and felt like we were as prepared as you could be, having not given birth before. So with my first labour, it lasted quite a long time, probably had about 24 hours of like low contractions, you know, not a lot happening very quickly. And then on the second day, when it ramped up and the midwives came, unfortunately there was meconium, so we were then transferred in. And I think although we knew that was a possibility, that was still, you know, a disruption to the calm environment that we wanted.
So did you feel, I mean, obviously at the time, looking back on it, do you think that transfer was justified? Was it a lot of meconium? You don't have to answer that. I mean, it's
tricky, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously, my daughter was fine, and it all went fine, and there was no issues from that perspective. Once, from the birth perspective, once we so the biggest thing was that it was quite upsetting because I really wanted a home birth, so that was quite a difficult change whilst you're also quite far along in labour. But actually having the hypnobirthing skills really helped to keep on track despite that big change in what was happening, I suppose.
Yes.
You know, I remember I was quite upset in the ambulance on the way in, but then actually once we got there, you know, we asked for, you know, the lights to be dimmed, we asked for where I was monitored to be able to move around so I wasn't stuck on the bed, and for the midwives to sort of leave us to it, really. So that was okay. And then the birth then from once I was in hospital actually happened quite quickly, and I was a bit thrown because I'd assumed that I'd be having a water birth at home, and then I was like, oh, I don't now know what position to be in or anything. And
so you didn't have a birth pool in the hospital?
No, I didn't. And actually, when I did the follow-up after the birth, because the monitoring, they were the ones that you could move around with. I could have actually had a pool. So I think that, you know, on reflection, that would have been better, but I don't really know why that didn't happen, or, you know, it's probably because it was all a rush. But then once we were there, I just had to just go with my gut instinct, I suppose, of giving birth. And I actually ended up birthing my daughter standing, just because that felt like the most natural thing. And I did it just with gas and air. And so from that perspective, it was, you know, it wasn't quite the birth that I'd hoped for, but actually I think
you were brilliant.
Had I not been prepared for that, it probably would have been quite a different outcome, I think. You know, that transfer in, I think, could have completely derailed it and it become quite a different birth.
Well done, you.
Yeah, so I think, you know, I remember for a long time after the birth being a bit disappointed that I didn't get my home birth, but you know, I think that's faded now, and and then that sort of takes me on to my second birth. So with my second daughter, because of that disappointment of not being able to have a home birth, I was pretty determined to have that home birth. So my husband and I redid the whole course of your online course, Catherine, to make sure we were fully actually, I think once having been through that process once, it then all clicks and it sort of goes deeper, I think. And
yes, that online course is actually brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant anyway, but if you're having a second baby, and whether or not you've done it for the first baby, it is an absolutely brilliant way of refreshing for the second baby, or doing the course so you don't have to find a babysitter.
Yeah, definitely. It was brilliant. And I'd say we were very into it the first time, but this time it was even more, doing all the listening to all the positive affirmations and getting your daily emails of all of that, and that really helped. And I think actually it also really helps that end of pregnancy, and especially when you're on your second and you've got a toddler, it's all a lot more hectic anyway. And my second baby, I was pregnant through COVID and we were still in lockdown, so it was quite a different experience. So it really helped give me those tools to kind of get through that pregnancy. And then so my second daughter was born at home. So contractions, I did have quite a show the night before, and I had a great home midwife that had done all my home visits. She lived in the next village.
That's perfect, isn't it?
Oh, it was so good. And she was very calm. So, she said, like, let's just keep, because the show was quite heavy, and she said, let's just keep an eye. And, because the moment you go into hospital, that's it. You won't be having a home birth. You won't be coming home. So, and then but she kept coming back. So she came that next morning, and then she came a few hours later, and then she said, look, I'll be back in a few hours, just keep me posted. And then I started to have real slight twinges, but compared to my first labour, I thought, well, this can't be it. This is like nothing. This is fine. And we still had our older daughter with us all day, and we were sort of just playing, and it was all fine, really. And so the afternoon sort of passed, and then I thought, I probably should phone the midwife and tell her that I think I'm in labour, but I'm not. It was so gentle that it didn't really feel like it, especially compared to the time before. So, so then I think she came at about 4:30. So I think I'd been having slight contractions since 1 p.m. and then by 4:30 the midwife arrived, and then she said, oh, actually, let's get the pool up and you can get into the pool. And I was quite big this pregnancy, which I think is probably quite normal for your second. And so just getting in the pool was just wonderful. It's just so lovely. It was, honestly, we had all the twinkly lights, and it was sort of everything I'd pictured it to be. And our older daughter, she'd popped to her grandmother's, but I had this urge that I wanted to see her again before having the baby, so they popped back to get some bits, and I just saw. So I was even in labour, and just with my daughter, and I didn't want her to think anything was wrong, and it was actually fine, just to be.
That's what people don't realise, do they?
Yeah. So that was lovely, and then from about 5:30, I was in the pool, and it was just amazing. It was, and it felt like there wasn't that long where the contractions were that strong. And I think the key memory of that birth for me is as she started sort of bearing down, like just this absolute euphoric feeling of like just love, you know, like with my husband, and it was just this, it was almost like an out of body experience, I suppose. And the home team of midwives were just amazing. You know, I'd had some gas and air, and then as the baby was coming, she sort of said, just trust me. And she said, just turn over onto your back, because but before that I'd been sort of on my knees in the pool, you know, breathing down, and then she said, just trust me and turn over. And she said, just breathe, just don't do anything, just breathe, just, you know. And then the baby just came, and it was unbelievable, you know. And it's such a different experience to giving birth standing as well, you know. It was so gentle, and, you know, she just came out, and, you know, she was £9.15 and so much easier than my first. And it was just, the whole thing was just wonderful. And, you know, I think it's really sad that home births aren't happening a lot at the moment. And, you know,
it's not just sad, it's wicked,
yeah,
because they're still persuading women to have induction, which takes loads of midwifery time. So if we delayed all the inductions for an extra 3 days, most of the babies would be born anyway, and there'd be plenty of midwives to do it.
Exactly.
Crazy, wicked.
I've got a friend now that's on her 3rd baby and really wanted to have a home birth after 2 easy births previously, and she can't have it because, you know, there's no staff. So it's really sad. But yeah, and our midwife's just amazing. She did all the follow-up visits, and, you know, just really supported us and almost became part of the family for that few weeks.
That is the perfect midwifery service. And you only get it on the NHS if you have your baby at home. It is known that the outcomes are better from a known midwife. And yet they're withdrawing the services.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Unbelievably awful. Anyway. Yeah. Perhaps lots of the powers that be will watch this video and they'll think, oh, maybe we'd better reinstate home birth.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hope so.
That's wonderful. But you had wonderful support, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't want you to name the hospitals, but you felt that the hospitals varied quite considerably in how they approached it. Can you say anything about that? It might help other mums.
Yeah, so I think with my first, I went to one hospital, being transferred in, and it did become much more clinical quickly, you know. So the birth was fine, but I had retained placenta, and then there was quite a few issues around that that made it a very difficult experience after the birth in the hospital.
A retained placenta is merely one that they weren't prepared to wait for.
Yeah, so that was all quite tricky.
And nor did they suggest a pool. And most hospitals, well, in their birth centres they have pools, but most of them in their delivery suites have a pool as well.
Actually, like I said, that's something that came out when I did you know, you can do the post-birth review, can't you? And they'd sort of said, I don't know why you wouldn't have been offered a pool. I mean, unless there wasn't one available. Obviously, at that point,
we're saying that the mum who is in labour has to take responsibility for sorting that out for herself.
Exactly.
Tough, isn't it?
After being transferred in, which is quite an experience. You haven't done it before. And then there was a few, with the retained placenta, there was a few errors, I suppose. You know, we didn't really know what was happening, and things happened that probably shouldn't have, which ended up with me being quite poorly, which obviously made, you know, being a first-time mum quite difficult the first 2 weeks.
Absolutely. So had you stayed at home, the transfer of meconium is generally done as a precautionary measure, not because there's actually a risk at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
You had a lovely baby and you did brilliantly.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, as time passes, and I think having a really even more positive second birth, then it kind of heals a lot of that,
yes.
that feeling.
And definitely, I think doing the KG hypnobirthing course heals it in itself, because it gets your mindset back to the positive.
Yeah, totally, because, you know, because of what happened after birth of my first, you probably, you know, I know a few people sort of thought, oh, you're a bit mad going for home birth the second time, you know, and
They
I think,
understand, do they?
Yeah, people just couldn't understand that I was so calm about it. And actually, you know, that it is doing the hypnobirthing that did that, because I remember before that I would have been worried about it, but I wasn't at all, and I felt totally at ease being at home. And you know, and the second time I did, the retained placenta issue did happen after the birth again, and then I went to another hospital, and actually it was a completely different experience. It was dealt with very quickly, very thoroughly and efficiently, and it was much calmer and clearer. And it was because I deliberately put that I wanted to go to a different hospital, so that if I did have to be transferred in the birth, then it wouldn't bring back any of that sort of those memories or that
very nice.
And yeah, so it was a completely different experience. You know, and if we were ever to have any more, then I'd happily go back there, you know.
Could I tell you my retained placenta story in case you do have another one and have a retained placenta? It doesn't necessarily mean that you would have a retained placenta.
Yeah, I know that's what it is, isn't it?
But this was a mum, hypnobirthing mum, a KG hypnobirthing mum, and she had one of our teachers as her doula, and she had a home birth with a very nice NHS midwife, and the placenta didn't arrive. So you could put the label retained placenta on that, or you could just say it hadn't arrived within the specified time by the NHS. Anyway, the lovely NHS midwife said, I'll give you 3 more contractions, and then we need to transfer into hospital for a manual removal of the placenta. And the doula, and I think this was outstandingly brilliant, I wish I had thought of it, but I tell everybody about it now. She said, I know what I'll do. So what is going to happen? 3 more contractions and we'll transfer in. Stress. When you're stressed, you produce adrenaline. When you produce adrenaline, you can't produce oxytocin, which is the hormone you need to expel the placenta. So it's just not going to happen. Anyway, the doula said, I know what I'll do. I'm going to get a blanket and I'll make a little tent. And you and your husband and the baby can snuggle into the little tent. And I'll read you a relaxation. And at the end, I'll say, just stand up and birth your placenta with gravity. So what was she achieving? She was giving them privacy. Now, oxytocin is often been described as a shy hormone, which likes privacy, which is one of the reasons why a home birth is so much better, because you're in your own private place. So she gave them privacy. They were having a cuddle together. And when you have a cuddle, and even more when you make love, you produce oxytocin. There are oxytocin receptors in the uterus, so it helps the uterus work to expel the placenta. They were cuddling the baby. Whether the baby was at the breast or not, I don't know. But if it was, nipple stimulation, more oxytocin, better able to expel the placenta. It was dark in that little tent. And when it's dark at night, we produce the hormone melatonin, which helps us get all dopey and calm and sleepy, and we go to sleep. There are also melatonin receptors in the uterus. We don't talk about them so much in hypnobirthing because the oxytocin is more important. So that was helping the uterus to work, to get the placenta out. And then she read a relaxation, which helps you calm. And when you're calm, guess what? You produce oxytocin.
Yeah.
So she was doing everything to facilitate the outcome rather than imposing a solution.
Yeah.
And at the end, she just said, now stand up and birth your placenta with gravity. And she did.
Wow. Yeah.
That to me was brilliant.
Yeah.
And it is I suppose what we do in the whole of the hypnobirthing course, we give you the tools to facilitate the outcome that you want. But conventional medicine has a tendency to impose a solution.
Yeah.
Like you have to transfer in and we'll do a manual removal.
Yeah.
And it's a big difference. And hopefully, everything we teach parents helps them. I didn't have that story for you when you did your course, or I would have told you, and you probably never transferred in and never gone through the trauma. But it was just such a beautiful example of how the body will do it if we all get out of the way and let it happen. And it's what we're really teaching throughout the course, how we can facilitate the outcome that women want. And you achieved it on your own anyway. You were wonderful for first birth and you got what you wanted for second birth. They still managed to transfer you in.
You can, the thing that you remember as well as the birth, it's not what happened afterwards. And
absolutely.
My girls as well, like they're, I think I've said this to you before, Catherine, but they're very calm and, I think even more so with my second, she just...
The birth has an effect, will have an effect on what you did for those girls. It will have an effect on them for the whole of their lives.
Yeah.
You've done brilliantly.
The most important thing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been lovely.
Thank you for watching the video. I hope it was useful. Hope you enjoyed it. It will be really important to us if you would subscribe to our channel. Click the link to subscribe and then you'll get all our most up-to-date information. It makes a difference to us and we're really grateful. Thank you.